I am the host and the presenter for this live webinar today. My name's Paul Harrison, and I am the co-founder of the travel franchise and Not Just Travel. And it's great to have you on this Business Nation live webinar, and we'll just giving everyone an opportunity to dial in as we speak. We have a very special guest on today, as you've probably seen from the graphics from our posts and what have you, and her name is Becki Houlston. So quick hi, Becki.
Hi everyone, looking forward to chatting with you.
So just make sure we can hear you okay, so that's great. So we've got a very exciting presentation or webinar for you today in terms of the content, because it's very relevant. A lot of the people in our Business Nation society here or community are all business owners or people facing challenges, and it's not just for business people. I know there'll be a lot of non-business people kind of dialing in today. We've made this a very open invitation, but the topics are very on trend. You know, we're all going through this coronavirus kind of experience, you know, something we'll talk about for many years, I'm sure. And I'm sure Becki will touch upon many things which can impact all of us, whether you're in business or not. So just do a quick introduction now. There's a few hundred people joined us on the call, so that's great. So thank you, everybody. And it will be recorded and you can rewatch this back as well. So like I said, my name's Paul Harrison. I'm the co-founder of a company called the Travel Franchise and Not Just Travel. And as the name kind of alludes, we are a travel agency franchise. And what we do is we allow people from any background, any walk of life, whether you've had experience in travel or not, to set up and build your own travel business, typically from home, but set up your own travel business under our umbrella, under our franchise. And in 7 short years, we've become kind of the second largest travel franchise in Britain, soon to be the largest, hopefully. And the reason I tell you that little bit really is Becki is somebody who's worked with our company for many years. And, you know, we've used Becki as public keynote speaker in our conferences, as a specialized trainer at big events and kind of more targeted small events as well. And so we're very excited to be able to invite her today to give you the benefit of her experience and her knowledge. And I'm looking forward to the session that Becki's going to do. But what happens with our franchisees is they don't just become travel agents, but they become business owners. And they're kind of two different things really, because selling a holiday is very, very easy, but being a business owner is a big thing. It's a responsibility, and you need certain key skills, you need certain knowledge, and you need certain attitude to be able to do that as well. And the great bit about Becki is she kind of covers all of those areas. So that's a little introduction to me. Becki, before we get into the kind of presentation, maybe you could just give us a bit of an insight into yourself as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. Hi, everybody. Isn't it interesting that all the people on this call, we've all got one big thing in common, and that's all. We've all been on sort of degrees of lockdown during this time. So thanks ever so much to everybody joining this call today, because especially if you're managing teaching, parenting, chefing, caring, shopping, everything, and running a business or trying to work out what you do with your business. So thanks ever so much for your time today. I have, as Paul said, I spent the last 12 years of, well, my whole life obsessed with human behaviour, which took me to then work with people, do a lot of training 12 years ago and set up my own business, originally as a coach, but then I bolted on. I became very, very interested in stress and anxiety in particular. So that led me to then go and train in all sorts of other things to find ways, not just through this sort of usual talking approach that people expect, but to find lots of different ways to help people manage threat. Little did I know how important that would become to everybody. So, you know, it's great to be able to share with you some elements of some of the things that I've become fanatical about, and I know really and truly helps people, because I'm not just somebody who sits, you know, and presents information. You know, every day, day in, day out, I actually sit with clients one-on-one and I help them to overcome all kinds of challenges within their business and their personal lives, because the two aren't separate. In actual fact, I'd say about 60% of my clients that come to me for stress and anxiety actually go on to set up their own businesses. which is something I didn't realise until recently, which just shows what is possible when you start to change your beliefs, to change how you feel, and to, you know, with somebody's guidance to help you think differently and feel differently about yourself in the future. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about my journey a bit more as we get stuck in. But you know, I'm up for questions. I'm up for making this interactive because we all learn from each other. So I'm not the only expert here. You know, we've all got bits we can add and value to bring to the table. So thanks.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Becki. You know, I know from experience, because you've been my coach now for several years, and I've not told you this, so I'll kind of spring this on you now. But when the kind of coronavirus started, I had just come off a cruise ship, and I think I kind of got the virus. I've not had a test, but I'm 99% sure we went through about 10 or 12 days of having it, and I went through the kind of, that wasn't bad, you know, getting the virus wasn't bad, but at the time of getting it was when it really first went public, and when there was more of a kind of realization for me that this is not another SARS or another something that is here for the news for 2 days and then it's going to go. It was like, oh my God, this is real. Oh my God, this is real. And it was like, I came off the ship and every day it was getting more and more real, and then obviously not well. And I was in shock, really, you know, because I'd been quite blasé about it, you know, for the couple of weeks beforehand, dismissing it, then almost depressed, you know, I guess, you know, being very unwell, and your kind of immune system really down, and then it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen to the business, and what's going to happen to the house, and everything else. And that lasted a few days, and luckily I snapped myself out of it. And you know, I give credit to that to you, because of the teachings that you've given me over the years, and I was able to kind of get a sense of reality and realize and what have you. So that's another reason why we're very proud. Steve and I are really excited to be able to put this on, because if anyone else is going through that feeling of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen, what's life going to be like, you know, and everything else, then you're our gift to them. So with no pressure.
Thank you, Paul, and I'm glad you're feeling better and out the other side as well on that, and got off the cruise ship as well.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be on one of those. So that's the kind of little preamble and setup from me, Becki, but I genuinely kind of mean that. And now I'm going to jump off the video. We'll still be here, but over to you, and we're excited to see what you've got to share with us.
Let me loose. Great. So hi everyone, thanks ever so much for joining me, and again for giving me your time. So before we get stuck into the subject today, which obviously is building resilience in uncertain times, I thought I might highlight something that that's been amusing me and keeping me thoughtful over the last couple of weeks, and that is, who are the brilliant people that think up these jokes that then go through Facebook and Instagram, etc. I have been in hysterics at some of the genius minds that put information together in such a humorous way. And one of my favourites that I saw yesterday, I thought I might share with you, because I think it's a good illustration of everything that resilience isn't. Because resilience is now a bit of a buzzword. If you're in corporate, you've probably seen it bandied around. It now becomes a language, but language isn't necessarily, saying resilience isn't naturally resilience. So we'll be exploring the difference of that. But something that amused me that I saw online was, if Donald Trump had captained the Titanic, he would say there is no iceberg. He would say we won't hit an iceberg. I think that's called denial. I think we'll come on to that in a bit. He would say, I knew it was an iceberg before anyone else. He would say, no one knows icebergs better than I do. He would say, the penguins brought the iceberg here. He would say, no one could have predicted the iceberg. He would say, we cannot allow an iceberg to stop our ship. He'd say, the crew is spreading fake news about icebergs. And he'd say, I am the best captain. Ask anyone. Well, there's some examples there of an attitude which is the opposite of resilience. So I hope that got you thinking. But whilst we're globally in this same situation, I think, you know, one of the things that came to light for me is that these times are so important. because 99% of people have lost something recently, be it visiting, the ability to visit people, financial, business, be it actually you still have a business, but you know your customers' demands have changed and maybe you're not sure how you're going to get through this. Peace of mind. Some of us have lost peace of mind. You know, these times have really affected people's mental health, understandably. Perhaps we've lost sense of freedom and tragically loved ones. It may be that we've lost our identity, that something that we've always done, been or gone somewhere, we didn't realize was such an intrinsic part of our identity. And now that looks, we don't know where we stand with that. And maybe it's also that we've lost some status somewhere. So I want you to think carefully. Yeah, 99% of people have lost something. So when we get back to going about into the world, into our business, to bear that in mind and act kindly, because you know you'll never know what someone has lost during this time. But of course, much as we can focus on what people have lost, there's also a lot that we can gain through these times too, if we just know how to manage our emotional state and where to put our energy. And sometimes it chooses that you know, we might wake up one morning in a certain mood and we can't seem to snap ourselves out of it. We might believe that we are stressed because we are worried about our finances. We might believe we're stressed because we're not getting a minute to ourselves. But what I want to start to help you to think is to think a bit differently about that. So what I'm going to cover is the fact that we are all experiencing grief in some way at the moment. But at the same time, we can all be gaining something. So what I'm going to cover in this session is how to identify your effective and ineffective behaviours when it comes to resilience. You're also going to learn about your own response to challenge, and you're going to understand how to build better resilience. So I'm now going to join my resilience of working out some new tech. So hopefully that is going to work for you all. And perhaps Paul, you'd just be kind enough to confirm for me that you can see that. Yeah, fantastic. Great, we're going well so far. So welcome to Building Resilience in Uncertain Times. And, you know, this is about really getting to understand yourself better and learning how to get the best out of yourself, you know, even if you are managing some really big challenges right now. So the first thing we're going to look at is a little favourite saying. I do love a saying, and that is, do not judge me by my successes. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. Because I want you to think about that for a moment. I think we've just come out of 2 decades where we very much judged the world, people, on success. You know, we look at someone and we want to be as successful as they are, but we never question what it takes to get there. And what's really important is also school sets us up. You know, those of you that I've met with before and perhaps have heard me speak before, you'll know that, you know, I often bring this subject up because I think it's so important. And for you, those of you that are parents, bear this in mind now. You know, are you modeling the old success model that doesn't work? Or are you embracing the new model? And which is one of resilience and adaptability. So the success model at school said, it's like a pointing arrow that just goes one direction. And it says that there are only 2 places to be: success or therefore failure by default. And if you're not feeling like you're constantly on the pursuit and climbing and successful, then where must you be? You must be somewhere else, which is failure. And so, you know, all the way through our lives, we've been judging ourselves on our what is our success right now. But we've not really been learning the recipes of how people got to be successful. So all of us in some way, in areas of our lives, it may not be in business, it may be in our relationships, it may be in our relationship with money, it may be in our relationship with our health. You know, we look at the people on Instagram, you know, with the desirable body that we want, and we look and we feel bad about ourselves. So we judge them on their success, but we don't really know what it took for them to get there. So we're all stuck a bit in the past of success. being a destination and somewhere we need to attain to be. We don't share our struggles. And business very much has been focused on success, and that being financial success. Now, of course, you've got to have financial progress to survive in business. Anyone who's gone past their first year will be nodding their heads right now. And congratulations to you as well. I mean, that already puts you in a good bracket. So it is about looking at how you get through those tough times. What can we learn from the times we got down and got back up again? Do we learn from our mistakes? And that really is the core of our resilience. So me, I've always been fascinated by people's behaviour. I've always been fascinated by what makes people behave in one way and what makes people behave in another way. Even when I could first talk, it took me a few years of life experience to actually realise that this was what I wanted to do with my life, and then set about as an adult retraining and retraining and retraining. And I think for any of you listening to this that have gone into retrain and relearn something later in life, when you come back to being a beginner again in something as an adult, when we're not used to being a beginner again, it can bring out some real challenges too. So I've always been fascinated by people's behaviour. And in my early coaching career, I set about the same track of coaching people to be successful, which I really enjoyed. I mean, I'd made my dreams come true. I'd learned goal setting. I'd learned some great questions. I'd learned some really cool things to help people transform their lives. But after a while, I became a bit bored working with people who were already motivated, already successful, and already knew where they wanted to go. What I then became much more fascinated in is the people who had high potential but really weren't fulfilling that, or had once fulfilled it but then found themselves stuck somewhere and not understanding why. So that then took me on a journey to become much more excited by stress and anxiety and actually trauma too. Now, I've worked with exited special forces. I've worked with people who've had a lot of trauma in their life, and I've worked with athletes that were top of their game and then suddenly they weren't, to help them understand what was going on. So but also in that journey, my own business threats of setting up my own business very much came to light. And that my ability to deal with the challenges of starting up my own business, where you don't feel you have any support unless you create that support, really start to sort of kick you about a bit. Anyone who's nodding there, it's normal. No one ever tells you when you set up your own business, no one ever tells you that it won't just become a straight line to success. And that if it doesn't go like that, that there's something wrong with you. And I think every single person, I've spoken to thousands of business owners over the years, and I think everybody can identify with that. But why do we not tell anyone? Why do we not tell the people coming up the line, actually, this is the reality, this is what it's like, it's perfectly normal, it's not you, don't take it personally. This is about finding that resilience. And when I think of resilience, often we think of people who faced difficult situations and responded in ways that led to better than expected outcomes. Stories of resilience often begin with bad news, with tragedy, and with pain. If you think about that. So resilience really is your ability to bounce back from adversity. Now, a lot of people would claim to be very resilient, but actually, when we spotlight what they're doing and perhaps some of the symptoms that they're experiencing, what they're burying your head in the sand is not the same as resilience. And we'll get a bit clearer on that as we go along. So stories of resilience often begin with bad news, with tragedy and pain. The story is made up by what happens after that, by the dawn that follows the darkest hour. And a recent book that I read by a woman called Liz Murray, which is an incredible book. It's a true story about her It's a true story about her journey from homelessness as a teenager to fulfill her dream to be accepted into Harvard. And all the time she was studying and going to school, when she was able to, no one had any idea as a teenager that she was sleeping on the streets of New York and was totally, totally homeless. It's an incredible, incredible story. You know, Nelson Mandela's story, for those of you that are familiar with that, again, that's demonstrating resilience. You know, one of my favorite films is Shawshank Redemption, where the main character, Andy Dufresne, I think, he gets put in prison for a very long sentence for a murder crime that he didn't actually commit. So not only did he lose his freedom, he also then had to endure prison and the challenges that come from being in prison. So we watch Andy, the character, go through his ability to build resilience against the conditions that he found himself in. But sometimes, obviously, there's a point of building resilience which then can cost other areas of our lives. So maybe we become bomb-proof, we feel, in the boardroom and in meetings, but we then forget to change that when we come home and become a parent and find ourselves in situations we can't control. I mean, maybe, you know, but resilience doesn't always have to be this big story that would impress everybody from a stage. For all of us individuals, you know, we meet things that we think, oh, that doesn't feel comfortable. Do we avoid it, or do we find some resilience to try and test that and move forward? Take public speaking, for example. How many of you have shied away from an opportunity to connect with people or to share your news of your passion or something that you sell with others because you're afraid of public speaking? So that is, you know, within our own day-to-day lives, we may avoid doing things instead of looking at how we build resilience towards making that more comfortable. I mean, with my own personal journey as well, I was in 2009 diagnosed with cancer, which returned several times over the few years. Thankfully, I'm fine now. But I can remember I had one surgery which was on my leg. And as I slowly recovered, I mean, it took me a couple of weeks to be able to make it to my kitchen, and I don't live in Buckingham Palace. And I just happened to take a walk each day. And each day, you know, as part of my physiotherapy. And as I got further and further along every day, and what would happen whenever you're recovering from chronic pain, and I think this is, you know, from emotional pain or physical pain, it's the same. As I got a bit further, you get too far some days, and then all of a sudden you get a lot of pain. But I happened to walk down this hill, and I hadn't thought about what would happen if I turned around to go back up the hill, and that my foot would now be at an angle that my leg wasn't going to like, as I was still recovering. And as I stood at the bottom of the hill, a little bit scared and thinking, oh my God, I could be here for like a week. I'm not sure how I'm going to get up there. No kidding, a guy in a wheelchair came along this little path in a chine, and he didn't even notice me. He stopped at the bottom of the hill, stopped for a moment, looked up to the top of the hill, took a deep breath, and just went for it. And in that instant, my moment of being at the bottom of the hill feeling unresourceful changed. I was inspired by his resilience. I learned something from him in that moment. My nervous system learned something from him in that moment. He gave me the power to get up that hill, and I got up that hill. Thanks to him. Never saw him again, don't know where he came from. So it's about thinking about how you are resilient, but sometimes it's in everyday events. A very incredible client of mine who is a para eventer. So she's very partially sighted, and she has some cerebral palsy as well. She is an incredibly, I mean, to get on a horse and do what she does, most of us wouldn't get on a horse without some limitations. And she was recently needing to apply for a new job, and she said to me, I just don't know what to put in my CV. And what she sent me just wasn't representational of the incredible, incredible resilience that this woman has. And I just pointed out to her, I said, Every day you get up and the first 5 things you do require more resilience than the first 5 things I have to do in the morning. And I said, and if you can encapsulate that in your personal statement, you're the most employable person that's just landed on that person's desk. But she hadn't seen her own resilience, and this is often the problem. So, you know, maybe it's that you had your heart broken and you're now daring to love again. You know, resilience doesn't just have to have a big adversity story. It is about looking within and learning from those around us too. So on that note, it's time to look at yourself. So I want you to ask yourself these 2 questions. I hope you guys have got pen and paper, a bit old school, I know, or if your phone's on silent, perhaps just use your notes on your phone. That would be really helpful, because I am going to get you thinking about yourselves. I'm not just going to sit here and give you information. You know, the important way to build resilience is to actually engage yourself too. So how resilient do you think you are in your life? And I'd like you to grade yourself now, 1 to 10. 10 being high, obviously, 1 being low. And then I'd like you to ask yourself the same question. If you're in business or in work, how resilient do you think you are in your business or job? And again, grade yourself 1 to 10, 10 being high, 1 being low. And if you're a parent, perhaps use the same question. So how resilient are you as a parent? Grade yourself 1 to 10. Great. So now we've got a starting point. So let's get more stuck into the story of resilience. So with resilience, there are effective behaviours to model. So the guy that came up, by me on that path that day in the wheelchair, he was demonstrating some really effective behaviours. He didn't need to tell me about them. He didn't need to tell me what he was doing. I felt them in him. And some of the really core effective behaviours are trusting yourself and trusting others. So I'd like you to score yourself out of 10 on how you trust others and trust yourself. So do you trust others? 10, yes, I trust others. 0, not at all. Do you trust yourself? Self-belief. Do you believe in yourself? And you can, if you're not sure how to answer that one, you can gauge that by, do you criticize yourself? Are you hard on yourself? If you are, the chances are your self-belief is on the lower side. Optimism. How optimistic are you? And that, that can be backed up by realism. No one wants to be stood in the garden saying there are no weeds, when they're up to neck in the weeds. That's not effective behavior. But keeping optimistic, looking at what is possible rather than focusing on what could go wrong. Effective communication. We may know what we feel, we may know what we want to do or want to say, but actually, how good are we at communicating that? Praise recognition. And not just for other people too. Praise, the attitude of praise begins with ourselves. Do we praise ourselves for what we do well, or do we only just find ourselves reprimanding ourselves? Oh, you silly idiot. That serves no purpose. Actually, how good are you at praising and recognition? Also asking for help. Asking for help is a big one. We have a big issue asking for help. We'll ask for help when we're on our knees. Oh my God, I now need help. But actually, it's about asking for help way before we actually really need help. And we have a big conflict there with feeling weak if we ask for help, particularly in business. Will somebody think I'm a failure if I ask for help on something? And embracing vulnerability too. Which is anything that we just doesn't make us feel that comfortable within ourselves. We'll always try and avoid. New technology for me makes me feel a bit vulnerable because I'm not sure what's going to happen. But I haven't let it stop me today so far. So thanks for bearing with me. So hopefully you'd have gone round through all of those and given yourself a score out of 10. Brilliant. So what brings us up next is our ineffective behaviours. So our ineffective behaviour examples are anger, self-explanatory. And anger can very often be used as a barrier. It's a protection mechanism. And people often use it to protect themselves from feeling loss. Because if you think about it, it's very difficult to feel loss at the same time as anger. So very often people who display a lot of anger are actually have an inability and a great fear of loss. Also, anger is a good communication mechanism. It says you violated a boundary of mine, but anger, the hormone of anger only takes 90 seconds to flash through your body. After that, you're not dealing with the here and now. But anger is also a way of releasing stress, but in a way that causes us more stress most often. So obviously denial, pretending it's not happening. You know, there are lots of people I'm seeing here on the news, etc., some of which are in denial. So therefore they don't really have the strategies to say, look, I'm dealing with this well, here's how you can deal with it too. They're just pretending it's not happening. They may not be opening their posts. They may not be contacting and ringing around their suppliers to see what deals that they can make. Which is sort of similar to avoidance as well. Avoidance, though, is you tend to know what you're avoiding, whereas with denial, you don't tend to recognize what you are avoiding. Blame. There's a lot of people who are going to blame. If only, what if? You know, and that can really lead you to depression. That blame game and that bargaining and telling yourself, what if I'd only done this? What if I hadn't done that? If only I'd done this? And blaming yourself is the fastest way to take yourself out of resilience. And then we get back to not asking for help, self-delusion, everything's great, everything's fine, another great British favourite, and self-doubt, obviously, which is when you, and blame tends to lead to self-doubt as well. So if you are internally blaming yourself, you'll start to lose your self-belief in yourself. It'll be eroded. And then when you're consumed by doubt, it's then very hard. I mean, for some people, it will paralyzes them. It's really then hard to get yourself going again. And then a big one that's being affected at the moment is being over-controlling. For a lot of people, their way of staying safe in the world and feeling safe in the world was to be in control of everything, particularly entrepreneurs. And when they then find themselves in this situation, which there is all the elements we cannot control, they then may look to become over controlling of elements that they do feel that they can do something about. So that sometimes can be not going by the rules. You know, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to have that barbecue out in the park. You know, that need to become over controlling. I'm going to be over controlling of my environment around me and the people that live in my home. So there's some really ineffective behaviours. So again, score yourself 1 to 10. This time, 10, this is a problem for me, 0, not at all. Great. So how do we change this? Let's get more resourceful. So what we've got now is your actual response to challenge. And there are psychologically, there are 3 core ways that people deal with challenge. And there's 3 behaviours. So I'm going to introduce you to those so you can have a think about what you do. And the 3 ways that we deal with challenge is, number 1, some people, you'll do 1 generally first. And that is, some people disconnect from the real problem. A lot of people in government, a lot of people who are very successful as consultants and in corporates are paid highly because they're very good at creating problems. The weakness there is most often they don't understand what the problem is. So they're farming solutions that get everyone buzzing and going and feel like something's making a difference, but the solution doesn't solve the problem. For example, a business that's struggling because the model doesn't work, it doesn't matter how much money you pour in as a solution, it's still not going to work. You're just going to elongate the strangulation of the business. So sometimes if we think something's a financial problem, Very often it's not. So are you someone that disconnects from the real problem and gets into solution mode? The second way that people deal with challenge is that they get stressed, instantly get stressed. And you can tell them because they're the ones that will become emotional from the get-go or angry from the get-go. And that will spiral more and more and more and more. And you can tell them to get help, you can tell them to change something, but they don't do anything until they're in enough pain, and then they'll change something. And the problem is the people that disconnect from the real problem are looking at the emotional problem and going, oh, I can't trust you to help me with this. And the people who are getting stressed are very aware of the problem because they are in the problem. They can feel the problem. They are dealing with the problem. They just don't know how to get to a solution. So both of these ways have pros and cons as coping strategies. But the best way, and I've met very few people naturally who do this, but it's one I would suggest you adopt, is to create many options. So whenever you meet a challenge, instantly create a bunch of options and keep creating options until you find one that works. And here's our biggest limitation. Our biggest limitation is mostly we create two options: stay or go, pay or don't, leave my job or stay in my job, stay in the relationship or leave the relationship. We get stuck with two options, neither of which really light us up. It's a bit like going to a restaurant and you look at the menu and you don't want really anything on the menu. So you just end up picking the one you liked the least. I think that makes sense. But so we get trapped by only making two options. Shall I get divorced or shall I stay in the relationship? Shall I spend all of that? Shall I buy a new car or not? We are trapped, utterly trapped by our ability to only look at two options. So that's you now. What I'm encouraging you to do is to learn to make lots of options. I mean, I would recommend 20 options whenever you meet a challenge, and those that work with me will know because they've done that too. And actually have a dedicated book or a folder on your computer where you just create options. It's a bit like getting creative and brainstorming. They don't all have to be great options. They really don't. You just need to train your mind like a misled Labrador. You have to train your mind to, as soon as it reaches a challenge, to get resourceful by creating options, and that will help keep you out of some of the other psychological traps that you can fall into when you're in a challenge. So let's go now. So how do you perceive your response to challenge? What is working for you and what is not? So I want you to just take a moment to just write down some notes on that. How do I perceive my response to challenge? What is working for me and what is not? I'm just going to give you a sec to just write that down or have a good think about it. And if you need more time out of this webinar, then please feel free to write. Just take a note of that question. How do I perceive my response to challenge? And then you can keep working on that. Great. So now we get into doing a bit more about your life and what can start to help your life in these current times. So what I'd like you to do now is take a note of what your top 3 current challenges are. Now, they don't have to be business, it can be anything. It can even be, how do I get my shopping done? How do I get some masks? How do I get some antibacterial? Whatever. What are your top 3 current challenges? How do I make some time with myself when I'm stuck in a house with lots of people? So identify those top 3 current challenges and be honest with yourself. No one else is going to see this. And what I recommend you do is, once you've identified those top 3 current challenges, is to create 6 options for each challenge. Now, some of you have probably just gone, oh, that's too many, I'm not going to do that. And again, if you're one of those people, challenge your mindset now. I want you to start thinking now, well, hang on. If this is the way I've done things in the past, perhaps if I created more options, I could see more opportunities. So I'd really challenge you. I mean, a minimum of 6. I mean, again, I go for 20, but you know, six is way more than 2, and will start to help get your brain out of the trap that it's in. So just think now, what are your top 3 current challenges? And perhaps just start to create some options for each challenge. Now, obviously, if we were doing this in a live event in a room together, I'd now be giving you a whole load of time to do that and discuss. But given where we are and what we're doing today, if you could just get thinking about that and jot down anything that comes to mind, and make sure you then come back to it at a later date. Great. So that's all very well and good. Okay, Becki, so now I know how to deal with challenge. But some of the threat to our ability to be resilient comes from our relationship with threat. And threat challenge, same thing, is what we perceive to be a threat. So for some people, they love being on a stage and talking to people and presenting or singing or dancing or whatever it is. For others, that would be a real threat. Now, what is it about that is the threat? Now, some of you straight away would say, well, it's being on the stage. But is it? And this is what I want to invite you to get better at, is to start thinking more about what is really triggering my threat. So very often, and I've worked with many people that have a mortal fear of public speaking, even in meetings, never mind a stage. One of the things that really is at the root cause of something like that is a fear of looking stupid. It isn't about the stage at all. I once worked with a barrister who had a terrible fear of public speaking. And although they stood in court every day, arguably public speaking, when it came to presenting a seminar, their whole nervous system would shut down, and that became a threat. So what was the difference to them? What was it about the one thing that made them feel, what was it about the seminar that made them feel vulnerable? Whereas in court, they didn't, they felt really comfortable. So start to think about some of the things that are causing you challenge and start to think deeper about them. What is the real threat to me? Because this is how you start to free yourself, is to understand what is behind the emotion. Once you've identified some of those things, the next thing you need to do is to learn to name the fear. So very often, we are not very good at naming the fear. We'll just say, oh, you know, I just don't feel very good today, or I'm stressed. You know, I'm stressed has become a universal get out of jail card for expressing every emotion. But actually, you keep yourself trapped like that. The way fears love to have a hold over you. And the way to take your power back from them is to start to identify them and to see them as separate entities from yourself. So, for example, I am not my fear of loss. I am so much more than my fear of loss. But sometimes I'll see my fear of loss trigger my behavior into being overprotective or avoiding things or not, even not closing down windows on a computer. You'll often see that with someone with a fear of loss. So name the fear. And that's a really uncomfortable thing to do, because the last thing we want to do is hang out with fear and pull up a chair with it and find out what it's called. And for some of you may already have gone blank and tried to escape that. Perhaps you started fiddling now or picked up your phone because, yeah. And if that's you, I just want you to note, that's interesting. Just even looking at that, at fear, has made me want to escape. And that's a normal normal response to have to fear. No one wants to hang out at the party with fear. We want to escape. But the way to dissolve fear is to become greater than it. And that is really the journey of resilience. So some common barriers are, and these are some common fears that take away our ability to be resilient. You know, there's one approach is to build resilience, but the reality is we've all got some contaminations here that, you know, they're big leaks in our systems that mean building resilience becomes like keeping filling up a bucket with holes in it. And the real work of building resilience comes in healing some of these common to many emotional barriers. So fear of loss, feeling not good enough, or a fear of finding out you're not good enough, a fear of feeling vulnerable. I mean, there's an amazing woman called Brené Brown who's done some incredible research on vulnerability. She's got a TED talk out there. If you haven't met it yet, go find it. Just bung into Google, Brené, B-R-E-N-E, Brown, vulnerability TED talk. She's also got a really good talk on Netflix at the moment as well. So if that's something you've never looked at before, because feeling vulnerable is different than being weak. And we just haven't catalogued our brains to know the difference, but our bodies do. Fear of confrontation. I'm, you know, hands up to that one. I definitely in the past have had a fear of confrontation, which has led me to being walked over by people for not asking for the right prices, for not, you know, from walking away from situations that I should have stood up for myself in. Fear of not being liked. Again, as a human being, one of our greatest fears is isolation. So if you look where we are now, for many, that isolation is a survival mechanism. When we're born tiny little children, we have the utter dependency on our caregivers. You know, we die without that. So we are social animals, and isolation is the cruelest way that you can hurt and harm someone, you know, when it comes to bullying or something like that. So isolation doesn't necessarily have to be being on your own. It's different than lonely. So, you know, bear that in mind as you are calling relatives, etc., that you can really help people by connection. So fear of not being liked, and obviously everyone's arch enemy, fear of rejection. Nobody likes to feel rejected. But some of these things mean that we'll avoid, not ask for help because we don't want to be rejected. And then we're really in the circus. And then we go to a talk about resilience, and it all sounds lovely and great, but these are the baddies that will take your ability to be resilient, naturally resilient, down. But the good news is, to be here today, you've already overcome so much. Just you being here on this planet, alive with life, is against the odds. Just being born, you, unique you, being born is against all the odds. Your journey with resilience began way before your mind ever existed. So you can trust that it is there for all of you. Nobody doesn't have it. You would not have survived otherwise. So your footprint of your resilience is already built within your DNA for you to have survived. So think of a challenge you've recently overcome. Got that? And maybe if it wasn't recently, think about a time in the past whether you overcame a challenge. So one of the best ways to overcome challenges is to look at what we need to learn. And I don't know about you, but my greatest learnings in life and in business haven't come from when everything went super well. They've come from the times when it didn't go super well. That's when you can either go to a place of blame and beat yourself up for a while, or you can look and go, okay, so what do I need to learn from this? And if you're asking yourself a question that begins with why, you've gone in the wrong direction. Let's just undo that a bit, because a lot of people, the quality of question they ask themselves is poor. They ask themselves a why question. Why hasn't that worked out for me? Why is that always happening to me? Why can't I seem to get those big customers? Why can't I seem to start my own business? Why can't my kids seem to look neat and tidy all the time? Our biggest assaults come from us asking ourselves why question. So instead of a why, I want you to, and it comes with blame, doesn't it? You know, why are you late? I don't really want to know why someone's late. I want to know what they're going to, are they okay? And what do they need to do to be on time next time? So look at what you have already overcome. And what were the learnings that you got from them? Because when you get those learnings, the problem ceases to exist. Now, what I've just said there may challenge some of you. You may be looking at your bank account and saying, well, you know, what do I need to learn from that? I need more money. If that's the case, then I want you to ask yourself, what's the real problem here? Resources, yes, but how do you get more resources? You know, anyone with their own business has sat there month after month after month, particularly in those first couple of years, wondering how you're going to make your money work and how you're going to pay yourself. But we made it. So what did you learn about that? And when you look back now, I think all of us would have said, okay, I could have done more of that. I perhaps could have done that faster. And then we applied that to our businesses. And guess what? It grew. So the real trick of building resilience is to look at what I needed to learn. What was the lesson hidden beneath the circumstance? So for me, with cancer, now obviously that's a very physical thing. From an emotional level, I had to learn that my self-care needed to be way better than it was because of the amount of people that I give to on a daily basis. Now, I didn't get that lesson until about the 6th tumour. Once I got that learning, I changed the way I ran my day. I changed where my energy went to. And thankfully, I'm fine. So it is about looking at what are the learnings and really, really taking an inventory. But obviously, if you're uncomfortable, sometimes it's uncomfortable. You don't want to look at that situation that makes you feel bad about yourself. So we just avoid it and carry on doing the same things and then expect the outcome to be different. So here, I mean, there are many, but this is just to get you accelerated. Because if all of you on this call today, on this webinar, started to embrace just these things, your life would change in an instant for the better. So the first thing I'm going to highlight is asking for help. But asking for help because you want to collaborate, not asking for help because I'm going to die in the next 5 minutes if I don't, or my business is going to fall down in the next 5 minutes if I don't. You are asking for help needs to become a collaborative experience. You know, the more we can collaborate and create community in our businesses, in our homes, in our friendships. I mean, for me, that's one of the most beautiful things that's come from this tricky time for everybody, is that people are making more time. They're being more present with me, which is something that really lights me up and is important for me. So look at asking for help. How can you ask for more help in your life? And some of you may be sitting there going, well, I asked my wife, I asked my husband for help and they just don't listen. So then look at how you're communicating that. The next thing is positive self-talk. One of the biggest things that impacts our resilience in the world is what we're saying to ourselves. You know, how are we setting ourselves up to feel good in a day? You know, we become, you know, what we feel, we become. So if you're making yourself feel bad every day, it's going to be really hard to get through a challenging time. So one of the biggest, we all, I mean, this is a webinar in itself, but we all have a negative voice somewhere in our heads. And so one of the best ways that you can shut that voice up is just to reply back to it out loud or silently in your head and just say, I approve of myself. It sounds so simple, but try it out. And if your voice in your head backs back and starts saying, giving you some jip, tell it again. I approve of myself. I approve of myself. And even if you have to say it 100 times the first day, it'll be 50 the next, it'll be 30 the next, and it'll back off. I promise you it works. I've never been wrong yet. Self-care. I mentioned that myself. I can only give to the amount of people that I do because my self-care is full up. The minute my self-care drops, my energy lowers. When my energy lowers, I can't do my best job for you. So self-care, so that's diet. And that's not about restriction, it's about good nutrition, it's about exercise, it's about good mental health, it's about good sleep, it's about understanding how to create some of those. And then self-belief and trust your gut instincts. That's a massive subject. Where did you score yourself on your self-belief? And also, do you trust or do you listen to your gut instincts? And do you trust your gut instincts? Because especially at these times when none of us know what the future is going to look like and how we get out of this and how we go back to, I don't think we go back to a normal life. I think we pick up with a different life. Hopefully we've got the learnings from this time so that we can use it as the asset that it is, that it has the potential to be, even though many of us have lost through this process. But your gut instincts somehow know where you need to go. And I'll tell you a very quick story about that. And that is, so I've written a book and it's about feeling safe in the world. And as part of my investigation in the book, I went to talk to members of the British Special Forces and firefighters and wave riders in Hawaii, and I had some great information from them about how they build resilience really and how they thrive under threat. And one of the stories that came back from the armed forces guys was a story about going on a mission in the night in the desert, and all of them felt uncomfortable. And these are big burly guys who aren't necessarily engaged in their emotions whilst they're at work for understandable reasons. But all of them felt, this doesn't feel right. This just doesn't feel right. So as they're all agreeing, something doesn't feel right. So they called in the RAF for air cover. RAF came in the fast jets with thermal imaging cameras in the dead of night and scanned all the desert around. And what they found was nothing. So the jets reported back to the guys and said, it's clear to proceed. As it happened, the weather took a turn for the worst and the mission was called off. The next day, when the information came back from the fast jets, they still didn't feel right. It didn't make their gut feel, okay, that's fine now. Still didn't appease them. But as I said, the mission got called off. The next day, they went back out on the same route in daylight. And that's when they found all the dug-ins. They were about to walk into a hidden ambush with the Taliban, which wouldn't necessarily have ended well for people. Somehow their gut knew. So look, am I listening and trusting my gut? If not, that's something to get help with. And again, asking for help, that's experts' help. If you're struggling with some of those emotions, get help, find some good help. Be it from a professional, be it from a group, from a community, never ever suffer. There is so much that can be done, even if we can't change what's happened to us, we can change how we feel about it in remarkable ways. Adaptability, the need to let go of control. This is our great evolution of now, is, historically, everything has been done by control and by being in control. And now all of a sudden, that's just not working so much. So how do I become adaptable? This isn't going back to this isn't going back to normal. Adaptability says, I'm going to take each day as it comes. and find the flow of life. What is life trying to teach me? But again, that brings us to goal setting, which we may not know where we're going, but we can also focus on what's important to us and decide and make a roadmap of how we're going to get to what's important to us. So there are 6 things that hopefully get you thinking a little bit more about resilience. We're going to ignore that one. So my last couple of slides that I want to take you through is just how can I help you get through this? And to think that if I could give you a way to discover emotional freedom, what would you do? Because for most of us, we don't realize what's truly possible. We don't realize what our true potential is. And we think we've got all the time in the world with a we'll see attitude to life and find out what happens. Now, being an adventurer is great, but what are you doing about the things that are going to get in your way? And finally, if you've got, if you want to have a chat with me about anything, if you want to have a chat with me, it was going so well, then, please feel free to contact me on the details below. And, my details have been shared around. And it isn't, you don't necessarily have to come and work with me, but I'm here to help. I'm one of you too. So I want to thank you all for your time today. And any questions, I think we've probably got a bit of time to take some questions, and I will try and work out how to switch my screen. So Paul, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Becki, and that was really, really great. Some brilliant kind of content there, and I hope kind of it now makes sense to everybody listening what I said at the beginning, and how I was able to make some changes kind of through the situation I was going through a few weeks ago. I can't put it anywhere near as eloquently as you can, so it's hard to relay that information, hence kind of inviting you on today. So that's really great. So I'll just wait to see if there's a few questions coming through. And there's a lot of thank yous, Becki. So, people really appreciating the content. And Jazz has put here that she's been doing the PE with Joe Wicks of a morning 9 o'clock, which has been made her day more positive during the lockdown and making her feel great. So that's really good.
No, routine is brilliant for these times. Also, just a thought, if you go onto my business Facebook page, which is Becki Houlston, Stress and Anxiety Help, and scroll back a bit, I've actually put a technique up on there, which is really good. You'll see me sat there like that with a gormless look on my face because I haven't made a thumbnail. And it's a really, really good technique to flick your nervous system into feeling safe again, which gets stress out of your body. And most people don't realize that sort of thing is possible. So, anyone who is feeling a bit wobbly, in fact, everyone should do it, I have to say, then please feel free to go. It's free. It's also on YouTube as well. So you can just put Becki Houlston in, and, that's a gift to you as well. It's a really good technique.
Okay, well, Becki, there's lots of thank yous, not so many questions, but here's what I'm going to do. Let me round up by kind of giving some clear kind of contact details and wrapping up today's kind of call. So this was a Business Nation webinar, which is our community where we're just inviting people to connect with us, to share ideas, to share inspiration and motivation and tips and advice. And we have special speakers on, and you've been, fantastic today, Becki, for that. So thanks very much. Certainly from the travel franchise and not just travel point of view, hopefully now you can see why we use Becki with our franchisees, with our business partners, because you play a big part in their personal development and business development. We don't help them sell travel. We don't help them sell travel. We don't make them travel agents as such. They're already great at that, but certainly the more underlying, the bigger things, the business ownership, the being able to tackle the day-to-day and the things that are thrown at us, and attitude, which is a big one as well. So it hopefully makes sense why we use you, and again, thank you for that. Becki has kindly given you permission to connect with her. So you can do that via Facebook and Instagram. Is that right, Becki?
Yeah, Facebook is Becki Houlston Stress and Anxiety Help. Obviously, I do have my personal one too. You might not get so much useful things on that. So yeah, I would recommend going to my business one, where I'm, often putting things to just, help you change how you feel. And also on Instagram too, which is Becki_Houlston.
Okay, and then Becki's website is Becki Houlston, and you can see how her name's spelt underneath on the graphic underneath .com. Okay, so feel free to take a look at Becki's website. But this is not a big pitch about Becki. Please don't misunderstand this. Today has been about kind of, Becki's in a very privileged position. She's gone through all this training, this experience, this knowledge, and has done so for many years. So today was a gift, really. It was about, being able to share for an hour some things that are going to help people in these very weird times. I'm trying not to say unprecedented, because I feel like I say that 10 times a day. I've never said it before, and now I'm like, I've got Tourette's with it, really.
It was a good word for 5 minutes, wasn't it? And then
it was, but they're weird times, and we're all acting differently, and I see it in me. I see it in the family here, the kids. I see it in people I work with. It's weird, and it's not all bad. I'm sure everyone agrees as well. There's certainly great points about what's happening now, but that's been so helpful. And I think the content you've covered there, Becki, the key bit for me about that is the general person doesn't think of this stuff. This is the stuff we watch the telly instead. We watch Netflix instead, because it's easier and more pleasant than to think about, rate myself 1 to 10 on what am I doing that's negative towards my, it's like we avoid it, don't we? It's easy to do something else. So if your webinar today makes people read a book, get on YouTube, call a different coach, just do whatever, just
absolutely
take a positive step. That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, and also it's about, we're not born with a manual, so none of us know how to operate ourselves, not really. And when you start to learn, just some of the basics that I learned years ago in coaching just changed my life. I was like, why didn't anyone teach me about goal setting before that? It's a very simple thing, never mind the way I work now, which is actually really changing how people feel. There is stuff we just never got taught.
Okay, well, Becki, again, we've gone over the hour, but really, really special thanks from Steve and I. And we haven't brought you on just as a special guest speaker to fill time, because you're our coach. So that's how much belief we've got in you. So it's been really fantastic. We will get contact details out via all our media channels and communication channels and everything. Feel free to get in touch with Becki. She's given you permission there. But hopefully this will just make you, whilst we've got time to pause and reflect, and hopefully it will help you do that. Hang on, she's right. There's things here I could be doing, I can change. We're not all as clever as you, so we can't all change it in a day, but we can start the journey and take some time out to reflect. So again, big thank you, Becki.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and lovely to connect as well with some of you that I know as well. So thanks ever so much for joining me.
All right, and thanks everyone for being on the call today. Like we said, the call's been recorded. We'll get it out to all channels so you can watch again, and feel free to share with friends and family and anyone that you think would be impacted by the content of today's call. That's a nice thing to do. It's a nice gift to be able to share with everyone. So we'll end the call there. Thanks everybody, and wish you a good rest of today's lockdown.
Thank you. Bye.